Usually when we talk about a civilization or an empire, there's this expectation of messiness,
Oh, yeah.
like
What a
like watching a forest grow over thousands of years. It's
yeah.
chaotic, right? Borders shift, cultures bleed into one another, revolutions happen.
And the history books are just filled with these jagged, unpredictable lines.
Exactly. The roots tangle with each other, branches snap off, entire species just kind of crowd each other out for sunlight.
It's organic, driven by, well, human or alien flaws, passions, and incredibly short-sighted decisions.
Yeah, the sprawling, dirty reality of history.
Right, which we find so familiar simply because that is exactly how our own history functions.
But then you step into the world of the Tao Empire, and specifically this place, this foundational concept we're looking at today known as the Tao Sept, and suddenly that messy forest is entirely gone.
It really is.
We're looking at a civilization that is, honestly, it's like a perfectly engineered botanical garden.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. It is breathtaking, it is rapidly expanding, and it is entirely, ruthlessly by design.
It is the absolute definition of an orchestrated reality, a civilization built not on, chaotic passions or historical accidents, but on chilling logic.
Which is what makes this deep dive so fascinating. Because the sources we are analyzing today portray the Tao Sept as far more than just a geographic location.
Oh, much more. It is the spiritual center, the political hub, and most crucially, the administrative template for their entire species.
It's the literal blueprint, the blueprint upon which they are actively trying to redesign the rest of the galaxy.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because for you, listening to this, to understand where this empire is going and to comprehend why they operate with such terrifying, unblinking efficiency.
We have to look at the crucible that forged them.
Right. The story of how cold pragmatism can build a towering civilization from the ashes of near extinction. And that begins with the physical reality of their homeworld.
Geography is always destiny.
It really is.
It dictates the evolutionary pressures, the resource scarcity, and ultimately the societal architecture of whatever species manages to, crawl out of the mud.
So looking at the sources, the Tau Septero, which is the name of their capital homeworld, is located in the Ultima Segmentum.
Right.
For those of you tracking the galactic map, that's to the galactic north of a region called Ultramar. Now, space is vast, but the physical description of this specific planet is incredibly striking.
It's very unique.
It is small, it is hot, it is dry, and it is arid. But the detail that truly anchors everything we're going to discuss today is its landmass.
Yeah, this is the key.
The entire planet hosts only a single continental landmass.
That one geographical reality changes everything. Because when we study planetary development, we have to look at how oceans function mechanically on a world with multiple continents.
Right, like Earth.
Exactly. Oceans act as natural, massive buffers. They allow distinct cultures, distinct species even, to evolve in relative isolation.
So if your tribe loses a war, or if resources get scarce, oceans give you a barrier.
They give you a timeout from your neighbors.
You get to hide.
You get to hide and you get to reset. But when you have a single continuous continental landmass,
You are essentially forcing a developing species into a state of perpetual, inescapable proximity.
exactly, constantly.
Everybody is living in everybody else's backyard permanently.
And combine that with a small, hot, dry planet where arable land is a premium commodity. You don't have vast, fertile plains to support wandering nomadic tribes peacefully.
Right. Everything is concentrated on one stretch of Earth.
Mechanically, that escalates trade because all routes are contiguous and land-based, but it violently escalates conflict.
I bet.
The competition for the few water sources, the few fertile valleys, on a single arid landmass would be unimaginably intense.
It creates an evolutionary pressure cooker.
Precisely, a pressure cooker where only the most aggressively cooperative or utterly ruthless groups survive.
The sources mention another visual detail that I thought was beautiful, but maybe a bit haunting when you consider the bloodshed happening beneath it.
Oh, the sunsets.
Yeah. The homeworld is famous for its spectacular sunsets.
It paints quite a picture. You have this intense, arid heat radiating off the rocks, a singular sweeping landscape stretching across the entire globe, and these blazing, dramatic, blood-red skies at the end of every day.
But those beautiful sunsets end up setting the stage for an incredibly dark period. Because this isolated pressure cooker of a planet doesn't remain a secret forever.
No, it doesn't.
The timeline in our text says the Imperium discovered the planet in the year 789 of the 35th millennium.
A monumental paradigm-shifting event, first contact.
The moment a developing species looks up and realizes the universe is infinitely larger than their single continent.
Right. And the Imperial exploratory fleets, the Adeptus Mechanicus, they log this discovery.
And what do they see?
They see a primitive Stone Age species basically hitting each other with sticks in the dried dirt.
Wow. But almost immediately after this discovery is logged, the absolute worst-case scenario happens.
Yeah, the entire region is swallowed by devastating warp storms.
We need to explain the mechanics of a warp storm here, for anyone who might not know, because it isn't just bad interstellar weather.
No, not at all. The warp is an alternate dimension of psychic energy, a parallel realm of pure chaos that ships use to travel faster than light.
Right.
A warp storm is what happens when that chaotic dimension violently bleeds into real space. It tears the fabric of reality.
So it makes faster-than-light travel physically impossible.
Completely. Because any ship attempting it would be crushed or driven mad by the psychic turbulence. It also blinds the astropathic choirs, the psychic communicators of the galaxy.
So it's not just a closed door. It's a door that has been violently slammed shut, welded closed from the outside, and buried under a mountain of static.
The Tau are completely, utterly marooned.
The timing is almost unbelievably tragic. I mean, they were given a brief, terrifying glimpse of the wider galaxy.
A realization that there are godlike ships floating in their orbit.
And then they are plunged into absolute impenetrable darkness.
Which leads us directly to the consequence of that isolation. The text calls it the Montau, the terror.
A profoundly fitting name for the societal collapse that followed. It was a brutal, all-consuming civil war.
Just absolute chaos.
A period of chaos and violence so extreme that it nearly drove the entire species to extinction.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the mechanics of this, and going back to that single landmass, it really is a sociological pressure cooker where the release valve is permanently broken.
And that's exactly what it is.
You have a society trapped in a finite space.
Yeah.
There are limited resources, they are deeply tribal, and they now know aliens exist, but they have nowhere to expand outward because the warp storms form a literal cage around their solar system.
And when a society is trapped like that, with zero external outlet, they inevitably turn on themselves. The violence becomes total.
Right. So I have to ask, is this near-death experience, this collective, species-wide trauma, the true psychological foundation of everything they become later?
What's fascinating here is how trauma operates on a macro level, across an entire civilization.
Tell me more about that.
Well, we are used to evaluating trauma on an individual basis, but species-wide trauma creates a completely different, incredibly rigid societal architecture.
Because the stakes are so much higher.
Exactly. The Montau wasn't just a tough century. It was a period where extinction wasn't a philosophical threat. It was a rapidly approaching mathematical reality.
They were literally running out of bodies.
Yes. And when a population experiences that level of sustained horror, it creates a desperate, bottomless vacuum for order.
Like a drowning person looking for anything that floats. They aren't going to check if the life raft meets safety regulations.
They will grab a razor blade if they think it will keep them above water.
Wow.
The Montau stripped away all the luxuries of ideological debate. When a society is brought to the absolute brink of annihilation by its own hand, the survivors are psychologically primed to accept virtually any solution that promises an end to the violence.
They just want it to stop.
Exactly. The desperation for peace becomes so profound that people will willingly, eagerly surrender their freedoms, their autonomy, and their ancient tribal loyalties if it simply means they get to survive to see one more of those beautiful sunsets.
So the warp storms essentially locked them in a room with a knife. They nearly bled each other dry, and that sheer blinding terror made them ready for a savior.
That desperate vacuum perfectly set the stage. A society in that state of absolute bleeding terror is incredibly vulnerable to manipulation, or at the very least, rapid restructuring.
Right.
And as the sources show us, that extreme vulnerability leads to one of the most profound and mysterious interventions in their entire recorded history.
Which brings us to their sudden, almost unbelievable salvation. Because right out of nowhere, right at the absolute bloody climax of this near-extinction event, a new group appears.
The Ethereals.
The text refers to them simply as the Ethereals, the architects of the modern Tau Empire.
And the text is incredibly deliberate in how it frames this intervention. It explicitly states they suddenly appeared.
Right. It doesn't detail a long, agonizing diplomatic peace process. It doesn't describe years of treaty negotiation.
Yeah.
It just says the Ethereals arrived, they brought an end to the Montau, and they united the warring tribes. Just like that.
The immediacy of that transition is staggering to contemplate. You have a species actively tearing itself apart, burning its own cities to the ground on a single continent.
And this new, previously unseen cast steps out of the shadows and fundamentally short-circuits the apocalypse.
And they do it under a brand new banner, a completely unprecedented philosophy that violently alters the trajectory of their entire civilization.
They call it the greater good.
The greater good, or the Tauva in their native tongue. It is the central axis upon which the entire Tau Empire spins.
And structurally, what the ethereals executed was a massive species-wide pivot.
Absolutely. They took all that kinetic, violent, destructive energy that the Tau were using to slaughter each other, and they channeled it into a single, rigid, unified direction.
The greater good wasn't just a political ceasefire, right?
No, it was a catalyst for rapid, explosive technological and cultural evolution.
The sources say it launched them into what they call their first sphere of expansion. We are talking about a leap from beating each other with rocks in the irradiated dirt to sending massive, heavily armed fleets out into the galaxy to build an interstellar empire.
A staggering, almost incomprehensible technological leap.
Yeah.
To go from a quarantined, self-immolating tribal species to a unified, spacefaring empire in such a compressed time frame requires an unprecedented, almost unnatural level of absolute social cohesion.
See, here's where it gets really interesting for me, and I have to push back on this narrative a bit.
Okay, let's hear it.
I'm reading these sources, and the suddenness of it all just feels deeply suspicious. It's like a massive, deeply fractured family is in the middle of a violent, bloody brawl in the living room, actively trying to kill each other.
And a total stranger walks through the front door, tells them to behave, and suddenly everyone just drops their weapons, shakes hands, and starts building a fusion reactor in the backyard.
Exactly. It completely defies all known anthropological models of conflict resolution.
Complete.
Does the text give you any sense that this was a natural philosophical awakening? Like, did the Tau simply reach a point of exhaustion and realize, hey, this fighting is bad, let's listen to these wise, glowing ethereals?
That's a fair question.
Or does the subtext read like something much more rigidly, maybe even forcefully imposed?
This raises an important question, and it is perhaps the central glaring mystery of the entire Tau Empire.
Yeah.
The sources are terrifyingly blank on the actual mechanics of this salvation.
So they just leave it out.
Pretty much. The Imperial scholars looking at this are paranoid for good reason. The text highlights the mystery of their appearance, presenting them as saviors, but the actual mechanism of their control is heavily obscured. We don't know the how.
The text just vaguely states they brought an end to the fighting.
Right. And when you look at how rapidly, how completely the Tau abandoned centuries of deep-seated, blood-soaked tribal hatred to seamlessly embrace the greater good, it suggests a level of control that goes far beyond mere persuasive rhetoric.
It has to.
The greater good did not become a popular political platform that was voted into office. It became an absolute, unquestionable, fundamental truth of existence overnight. It became their ultimate survival mechanism.
And you simply don't argue with the survival mechanism.
You cannot. If the alternative to obedience is a return to the manteau, the terror, the madness, and the literal extinction of your species, then the greater good isn't a choice you make at the ballot box.
It is a biological imperative.
Exactly. The ethereals masterfully position themselves as the sole arbiters of that survival.
But how do they actually enforce it?
Well, whether this total compliance was achieved through profound charisma, a latent psychic presence in the warp, sophisticated pheromonal mind control, or deep genetic conditioning.
The text refuses to answer.
Right, but the end result is crystal clear. Total unwavering submission to a singular ideology.
It's the ultimate my way or the highway, except the highway is a return to a literal apocalypse. So everyone gets in line, and they don't ask questions about the people giving the orders.
And they didn't just get in line, they built an entire sprawling galactic civilization around that line.
Which is a perfect transition.
Right.
Because a philosophy, even one as powerful and all-encompassing as the greater good, is really just a theoretical idea until you start building it into stone, steel, and society.
Exactly.
To truly understand what the greater good looks like in mechanical practice, we have to look at the architecture. We have to look at the physical reality of the Tau Sept today.
Because the architecture of a society is never accidental. It is always a physical, tactile manifestation of its core values and its ruling structure.
And the sources give us an incredible detailed look at this. Tau, the planet itself, is the absolute center of power.
The crown jewel.
Right. It is the most prestigious of all the septs, a sept basically being a colony or a territory, acting as the capital of the entire interstellar empire.
Politically, it is the undisputed hub. It houses the Tau High Council. And crucially, that council is led directly by the Ethereal Supreme.
So they're still in charge.
Oh, absolutely. The mysterious saviors who walked out of the Manteau are still very much in direct, absolute control. The text notes that no other Sept world can even dream of challenging the prestige of Tau.
Though it does mention a fascinating caveat. A place called the Viorla Sept can match its military power.
That implies a very calculated separation of functions.
How so?
The ethereals are deeply pragmatic. Tau is the ideological, administrative, and spiritual heart. It is where the blueprints are drawn.
Okay.
Viorla, on the other hand, acts as the muscular enforcer of that ideology. They keep the muscles slightly separated from the brain to maintain the aesthetic of a peaceful, enlightened core.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And looking at that core, the capital itself, the text paints a picture that is full of stark, deliberate contrasts.
Very deliberate.
And it does this by directly comparing the physical look of the Tau to the Imperium of man. For you listening, try to visualize this. The sources describe the cities of the Tau Sept as vast expanses of white marble, reaching incredibly high into the sky, cutting through the arid atmosphere.
It is designed to represent total purity. It represents clarity and enlightenment.
It's a highly weaponized aesthetic choice, isn't it?
Oh, without a doubt. When you think of pristine white marble reaching into a blue sky, you think of grand monuments. You think of ancient Greece, or Enlightenment, order, and untroubled reason.
Right.
And the text juxtaposes this directly, intentionally against the Imperium. It explicitly contrasts these white cities with the grim darkness, superstition, and polluted hives of the Imperium.
We should quickly explain what a hive city is to make that contrast land.
Good idea.
A hive in the Imperium is essentially a sprawling, Gothic, rusted metallic mountain, miles high, crammed with billions of miserable humans choking on their own industrial smog, living in absolute squalor, driven by religious fanaticism.
A physical manifestation of humanity's chaotic decay.
Right. And then you look at the Tau Sept. It is clean, it is hyper-efficient, and it is methodically planned down to the millimeter.
Even their color scheme, stark, blinding white with uniform, standardized variations of yellow and brown screams absolute order. Everything is categorized.
And that categorization extends past the architecture and directly into the population and the landscape.
Completely.
Even their agriculture is brutally regimented. The text mentions that because the planet still has so little naturally arable land, the surface is covered with incredibly efficiently run collective farms.
And these aren't family farms.
No, these are massive, industrial-scale agricultural zones managed specifically by the Earth caste. Everything has its designated place.
Every single individual belongs to a caste: earth, fire, water, air, or ethereal, and they perform their function without deviation.
Complete, systematic maximization of limited resources.
Nothing is wasted, no individual is without purpose, and absolutely nothing is left to the chaotic whims of chance.
But then we get to this detail in the sources that absolutely fascinated me, and it throws a massive shadow over all this white marble.
The Equator City.
Yes. It's about the capital city itself. The text explicitly states that the capital city sits exactly on the equator of the planet, and, quote, no human has ever walked there.
Such a great detail.
Why? Because imperial planetary scans are completely blocked by some unknown, highly advanced Tau technology.
It's a brilliant, highly revealing detail. It adds such a complex, almost sinister layer to this supposedly enlightened, transparent empire.
I was trying to wrap my head around this aesthetic. The white marble, the clean lines, the absolute unyielding order. It reminded me of an ultra-modern, pristine, state-of-the-art hospital.
I like that analogy.
Right. From the outside, walking up to it, it looks beautiful, it looks clean, safe, and wildly efficient. You feel like you're in good hands.
Sure.
But when you actually step inside and walk the halls, the sterility itself becomes intimidating. There is no warmth. There are no personal touches. It's just protocols, procedures, and cold, hard tile.
Yes, exactly.
And I look at this Equator City, and I have to ask you, isn't there something inherently contradictory or deeply secretive about building a shining white city of enlightenment, but then utilizing unknown, sensor-baffling technology to completely block anyone else in the galaxy from even looking at it?
It is an immense contradiction, and that is exactly what makes it so revealing of their true nature. The Tau use aesthetics very specifically as a psychological weapon.
Interesting.
The pristine white marble, the immaculate cleanliness, the perfect societal order, it isn't just for hygiene, and it certainly isn't just for civic pride. It is pure, unadulterated propaganda for the greater good.
Propaganda built out of marble instead of paper.
Precisely. It is a visual, undeniable argument. It is the Tao projecting to the galaxy. Look at our cities, look at our perfection. Our way of life is objectively, demonstrably superior to the chaos, the pollution, and the misery of your imperium.
It's designed to make any imperial diplomat or trader who sees it feel like their own society is backward, barbaric, and in desperate need of Tao intervention.
But they won't actually let you see the center of it.
Exactly. You can look at the brochure, but you can't look at the headquarters.
And that is the crux of the entire empire. The absolute secrecy at the equator reveals that the purity is, at least in part, a carefully managed facade.
Right.
True enlightenment, true openness doesn't require a planetary cloaking device. If your society is a genuine utopia, you want the universe to study it. By blocking the scams of the capital city, the ethereals are violently protecting the core mechanism of their control.
What do you think they're hiding?
Well, it suggests that behind the white marble, behind the beautiful sweeping sunsets and the endless propaganda of the greater good, there are gears turning that they absolutely do not want the rest of the galaxy to see.
Wow.
Returning to your hospital analogy, the lobby is pristine, the nurses are smiling, but they have boarded up the windows to the operating room.
Because you might not like how the surgery is actually being performed.
Or worse, you might realize that the patient strapped to the table never consented to the procedure in the first place. The ethereals are hiding the how of their society.
Man, that is genuinely chilling. But here's the reality of the galaxy they live in. An empire cannot expand across thousands of light years using just pristine marble aesthetics and hyper-efficient collective farming.
No, it cannot.
You need force. You need a mechanism to take that blueprint, that rigid greater good, and aggressively, violently export it to the stars.
You need a military doctrine that perfectly seamlessly aligns with your governing philosophy.
Which brings us to the actual anatomy of their military, the fire caste, the warriors of the Tau Sept.
The sharp, unsentimental edge of the greater good.
The sources tell us that the warriors who hail from the Tau Sept are highly respected across the entire empire. They're considered wise, they are incredibly experienced.
And there is a deep historical lineage here.
Right. They are the direct genetic and cultural descendants of the original explorers who fought during that first sphere expansion we talked about earlier. They were the ones who first left the homeworld.
They carry the legacy of the initial outward push. They are the standard bearers of the Tau military tradition.
And because Tau is the administrative and cultural template for the whole empire, their specific way of waging war is described as the default setting for the entire civilization.
It is a balanced, highly generalist approach.
Which is very telling of their mindset, isn't it?
It really is. They don't specialize in just overwhelming brute force, like an orc Wa, or just lightning-fast stealth, like the Eldar. They specialize in systemic, unshakable balance.
The text breaks down the mechanics of how they actually fight, and it is a masterclass in combined arms doctrine. They deploy what is called a hunter cadre.
Right.
This is a multi-role formation that seamlessly integrates three main distinct components. First, you have the fire warrior infantry. These are the boots on the ground, equipped with incredibly advanced pulse rifles that can burn through armor at range.
Devastating weapons.
Second, you have the deadly battle suits. These are massive mechanized armor units, piloted by veterans, acting as the heavy, mobile hitters. And third, you have highly mobile grav vehicles acting as transport and gunships.
And they all work together as a single, flawless, cohesive unit.
It is the philosophy of the greater good weaponized on the battlefield.
Exactly. Every single cast, every individual unit playing its exact mathematically designated role for the ultimate success of the whole.
There are no glorious lone wolves.
There is no individual heroism. There are no dramatic last stands for personal glory. Just perfect, interlocking, emotionless synchronization.
And when they deploy this hunter cadre, they rely on two fundamental overarching strategies. Two philosophies of war.
Yeah.
The text explicitly names them.
The Kayan and the Montka.
Right. The first is Kayan, which translates to the patient hunter, and the second is Montka, which translates to the killing blow.
Two sides of the same deeply pragmatic coin. The trap and the execution.
Tell us how that works.
It reflects a very calculated, almost scientific approach to warfare. Kayan involves offering a lure drawing the enemy into a perfectly prepared kill zone, and then unleashing a crossfire so dense it simply erases the target.
And Mocha.
Monka is the aggressive counterpart, identifying the absolute critical linchpin of the enemy force, their command structure or heavy armor, and applying overwhelming decisive force to instantly decapitate it.
But here is where the text points out a very specific, brutally efficient combat tactic they use within these strategies. And it honestly kind of blew my mind because it seems completely counterintuitive to how we think about fighting a massive battle.
It's very unique.
The sources detail that Sept warriors have a distinct tendency to completely forego targeting multiple enemy elements at once. Instead, they concentrate their entire cohesive force on utterly obliterating a single enemy unit before they even look at the next one.
Maximum destructive efficiency applied to a singular point.
That's exactly how the text phrases it. But I was trying to visualize the mechanics of this on a chaotic battlefield. Imagine a chess player, and this chess player is incredibly aggressive, brilliantly equipped, but they operate with a bizarre tunnel vision. They only know how to focus on capturing one single piece at a time.
Right.
They will commit their knights, their rooks, their bishops, their entire side of the board entirely to destroying one single enemy pawn, completely ignoring the rest of the board, ignoring the enemy queen advancing on them while they do it.
Once that pawn is absolute dust, they analytically recalibrate and choose the next piece.
Right. Now, on one hand, that one pawn is absolutely getting destroyed. There is no survival.
Without question, it is a terrifying concentration of localized force.
But on the other hand, the text explicitly calls this out as a fatal weakness. It says they are incredibly slow to change their ways, and because they use these exact same established doctrines repeatedly, they become deeply predictable.
Yes.
An experienced imperial commander can figure out their algorithms, sacrifice a pawn to draw their entire army out, and overcome them. And this is the mechanical disconnect I don't understand.
It's the paradox of the Tao.
I have to ask you, how can a civilization that evolves so rapidly, I mean, they went from beating each other on a single dusty continent to piloting mechanized battle suits in interstellar space fleets in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
How can a society with that kind of incredible technological agility be so stubbornly rigid, so mathematically predictable in how they actually fight a war?
It seems like a massive paradox, but if we connect this localized tactical rigidity to the broader macro picture of their society, it actually makes terrifying perfect sense.
Really? How so?
You're right to point out the extreme tension between their rapid technological evolution and their inflexible military doctrine. But you have to remember what that rapid evolution was fundamentally built upon.
The greater good, the absolute decree of the ethereals.
Exactly. Their entire civilization wasn't built on a series of natural, messy experiments. It was built practically overnight on an absolute, infallible template handed down from on high by the ethereal.
Okay, I see where you're going.
The greater good isn't just a polite suggestion for how to live. It is a rigid, mathematical formula for a perfect society. And that rigidity permeates every single layer of their existence.
So their tactical doctrine, the Kayan, the Monka, the systematic obliteration of single targets,
isn't just a military field manual. It is the philosophy of the greater good translated directly into violence.
So it's not just strategy, it's dogma.
It is the highest form of military dogma. Think about the implications of that. When your entire society is built on the foundational premise that the ethereals have handed you the mathematically perfect template for existence, deviating from established doctrine isn't just a tactical adjustment.
What is it then?
It borders on philosophical existential heresy.
Oh, wow. So if a Firecast commander on the battlefield is watching their single-target strategy fail and says, hey, let's split our fire, the enemy is flanking us, this mathematical formula isn't working.
They aren't just questioning a military strategy. They are inadvertently questioning the fundamental truth of their entire civilization.
Precisely. To admit that the established ethereal-approved doctrine is flawed in a given situation is to admit that the greater good itself might have a blind spot.
And a society that was built entirely to escape the blinding terror of the Manteau cannot, under any circumstances, tolerate a blind spot.
A blind spot means vulnerability.
And vulnerability means extinction. So they become rigidly predictable. Their absolute reliance on maximum mathematical efficiency becomes a psychological straitjacket.
They would literally rather execute a flawed, predictable strategy perfectly and die than improvise a messy, chaotic solution to survive.
Because improvisation is chaotic, and chaos is exactly what nearly destroyed them in their past.
So what does this all mean? We have a society forged in the deepest, most bloody terror imaginable, rescued by mysterious, potentially sinister saviors.
Living in pristine, white marble cities that use advanced technology to hide their core mechanisms.
And fighting wars with a mathematical rigidity that borders on religious zeal. When you put all those distinct mechanical pieces together, it leads to the final and, frankly, the most profoundly disturbing part of our deep dive today.
The ultimate horror.
Because this rigid, unyielding efficiency perfectly encapsulates the true underlying terror of the Tau Sept, as described in our sources.
It forces the reader, and you as the listener, to entirely redefine their concept of what an enemy actually is.
It really does.
Yeah.
Because the text gives us this final, profound argument about what the Tau Empire truly represents in the wider galaxy. It says that the ultimate horror of the Tau Sept is not cruelty.
That is a vital, necessary distinction to make in a universe as dark as this one.
They aren't evil in the traditional visceral sense. They aren't malicious. They aren't operating out of sheer madness or a sadistic desire to inflict pain.
They don't take any pleasure in your suffering. A Dark Eldar will torture you for the sheer joy of it. An Orc will butcher you because fighting is fun. The Tau feel none of that.
Which, in a very strange way, almost makes it worse.
It really does.
The text breaks down what makes them truly terrifying. It describes their nature as a cold, insidious efficiency. It states that they represent a civilization that has completely intentionally shed the chaotic passions of humanity, and they have replaced those messy, unpredictable passions with a chilling, unblinking logic.
Chilling logic. It is the absolute horror of the industrial assembly line applied to galactic conquest and species eradication.
The text says their belief in the greater good is so absolute, so structurally unquestionable, that it can and will justify any means necessary to achieve it.
When your societal endpoint is mathematically guaranteed to be a perfect utopia, then any action taken to get there, whether it's building a hospital or sterilizing an entire planetary population, is by definition morally justified in their eyes.
The math demands it.
Exactly. They systematically dismantle the old order of whatever planet they encounter.
And they do it not through rage, not through a hatred of the alien, but through the methodical, emotionless application of advanced technology, superior integrated tactics, and this unshakable, terrifying faith in their own manifest destiny.
It's all so clinical.
I was reading this final section, and I wanted to explain it to you, the listener, like this. We are biologically conditioned to fear the monster that is screaming.
The visceral threat.
Right. The monster that is charging at you in the dark with a rusted weapon, foaming at the mouth with hatred and bloodlust. That is traditional, understandable evil. You can fight that.
But they are the monsters holding a clipboard.
Oh, that's good.
They're standing there, wearing a perfectly clean white uniform, smiling politely, and explaining to you in a palm-soothing voice that your culture is mathematically inefficient and your total assimilation is just standard operating procedure.
It's nothing personal.
It's just for the greater good.
Is this cold, bureaucratic approach why the text suggests they might actually be the most insidious, dangerous enemy in this entire grim universe?
Yes, absolutely, because it is a psychological horror that entirely bypasses all our normal evolutionary defenses.
How so?
When an enemy violently hates you, when they want to destroy you out of sheer malice or religious fanaticism, you can fight back with righteous indignation. You can rally your own chaotic passions against theirs.
You could build a fortress of hatred to keep them out.
But how do you fight an enemy that deeply, genuinely pities you? How do you fight an enemy that genuinely believes, down to their genetic code, that they are doing you a profound favor by erasing your culture and dismantling your history?
They don't want to kill you. Killing you is inefficient. They want to process you.
Exactly. They want to process you into their better world. It is an incredibly insidious threat because it actively appeals to a society's exhaustion.
It's a huge point.
In a galaxy filled with perpetual war, grim darkness, starvation, and toxic pollution like the Imperium, an offer of clean white cities, collective purpose, stable food supplies, and an end to all conflict is incredibly seductive.
It's a siren song.
But the hidden cost is your individuality. The cost is your messy, chaotic, beautiful human passions. The Tau represent the ultimate terrifying sanitization of existence.
They will arrive at your world, dismantle it piece by piece, perfectly catalog your history, and replace it with their white marble.
And they will do it with a serene, unblinking, emotionless efficiency that is far more terrifying than a raving lunatic with a sword, because the lunatic can be stopped by superior force.
The clipboard-wielding bureaucrat of the greater good stops you by logically, calmly convincing you to put your own sword down and step into the assimilation chamber yourself.
Because according to their math, resistance is simply illogical.
Man, that is an incredibly dark but utterly fascinating mechanism to unpack.
It really is.
So let's just briefly recap this massive journey we've been on today. We started on a single, hot, arid, isolated continent, examining a society entirely consumed by the horrific, bloody, chaotic pressure cooker of the Monteau.
Right.
We saw the sudden, mechanically unexplained, almost too perfect arrival of the mysterious ethereals, who birthed the rigid philosophy of the greater good to save them from extinction.
We explored the architecture of that philosophy.
Those pristine white marble cities that use highly advanced, secretive technology to hide their core operations from the galaxy.
Then finally, we unpacked a military and societal machine that operates with a terrifying, cold, mathematical efficiency.
An empire slowly, inexorably expanding across the stars, utterly convinced of its own absolute, chilling righteousness.
It is a remarkable, deeply unsettling trajectory, from the desperate, bleeding brink of total extinction to a civilization that coldly believes it is biologically destined to save the rest of the galaxy from itself, whether the galaxy wants to be saved or not.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final thought to roll over as you go about your day.
Something to chew on.
We spent this time talking about this chilling logic and this foundational idea of entirely shedding chaotic passions in exchange for a supposedly perfect, meticulously engineered system.
It leads to a very lingering and perhaps deeply unsettling philosophical question. We look at the Tau Sept, we look at their white marble and their absolute harmony, and we have to ask ourselves,
If a society actually achieves perfect order, if it manages to achieve total unbroken peace, maximum efficiency, and absolute safety for all its citizens.
but doing so requires you to entirely shed your human passions, surrender your individuality, and blindly, mechanically submit to an unquestionable, unseen greater good.
At what point does a utopian promise secretly become the ultimate prison?
A prison where you don't even realize the door has been locked from the outside, simply because the walls are made of beautifully polished white marble.
A flawless, gleaming cage.
Something to really think about the next time someone holding a clipboard promises you a mathematically perfect system.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep reading, keep questioning the systems and the information around you, and we'll catch you next time as we unpack another massive, fascinating corner of the universe.